All right, welcome back. This is the first presentation of Chapter 5 on civil rights. Let's see, here are the key topics. Again, we're going to have a story about how civil rights relates to American government. The first topic, again, we'll talk about why civil rights, what they are, how they are achieved, and then the rest of the things you can probably read, I hope. Here are the key learning objectives. Again, I'll give you a second to take a look at those. All right, so Desmond Meade was a felon in Florida, and he had gone on. He had gotten himself put together. He'd had a drug problem. He ended up in prison. He was a convicted felon. In Florida, that means that you are basically, or at least up until 2000 and whatever, 2018, you basically were banned for life from ever voting. He had earned a law degree and really couldn't practice law, so he worked to create a nonprofit, the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, and started working on a petition drive. The petition drive, which again, there was a November ballot in 2018, and 64% of the people that showed up basically supported the initiative, which appeared to give the 774,000 disenfranchised felons the right to vote. Now in Florida, that's a lot of people. That's a significant number of voters that could actually have an impact on how things would turn out in an election. So the Florida legislature was a little disturbed by that, and basically they said, well, we're going to pass a law that basically said before you can vote, you have to pay all your fines. This is something that actually came up in the last couple of years with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He put together a task force to identify and apprehend people who had engaged in voting fraud. And a lot of the people that they rounded up were former felons who were not aware that they had additional court fees and administrative fees that were outstanding. And again, part of the problem was that Florida did not put these people in a position where they knew that they had additional fines to pay before they could register to vote. And in many instances, Florida registrars registered them. They believed they were eligible to vote. So in most instances, these folks that were there was DeSantis had a big press conference talking about how these people had broken the law and they were going to pay the price. And it ended up, most of these folks ended up having the charges dropped against them. But in any event, it kind of highlights, on the one hand, arguments about the fact that some people are subject to unfair discrimination, and they have to fight to overcome the challenges, and the barriers that are erected because of legal discrimination. So what are civil rights and how are they achieved? Again, many of the most profound changes to our constitutional system have occurred because of the political struggles of groups of Americans previously subject to legalized discrimination. Throughout American history, organized groups have played a critical role in fighting for equal recognition and equal dignity. So defining civil rights. Civil rights are guarantees of equal opportunity and protection through the obligations imposed on government to protect individuals. Most civil rights claims emanate from the 14th Amendment's guarantees of equal protection under the law and due process. So by implication, civil rights impose a positive duty to right past wrongs by some means. And again, the means by which governments seek to redress the harms caused by past discrimination is a major source of conflict between conservatives and liberals. On the one hand, conservatives believe that the best thing to do is simply to just stop discrimination. They believe that further attempts to redress past harm amounts to reverse discrimination, which they view as a cure worse than the disease. Wokeism, whatever you want to call it. Liberals, on the other hand, strongly believe that the damage caused by past discrimination is real and can be lasting, and that government should take steps to ensure that those categories of Americans subject to past discrimination are extended opportunities to ensure that they can actually succeed going forward. Again, two important distinctions between civil liberties and civil rights: how they are established. Civil liberties are kind of encoded in both the Constitution, but importantly in the Bill of Rights, especially in the First Amendment and places like that. The way they are protected, likewise, is again, as I said, the 14th Amendment is the origin point for most civil rights claims. So while Americans largely agree with the basic premise of civil rights, they oftentimes disagree passionately over what civil rights require. Achieving civil rights are largely the product of social movements. Social movements are defined as sustained campaigns brought by and on behalf of disadvantaged populations in support of a political or social goal. The existence of social movements reflect the realities of inequality. Frequently, inequality is an inevitable byproduct of discrimination. The existence of social movements also reflects the wisdom of the adage, don't get mad, get organized. Part of what makes a movement effective is in achieving their goals is the ability to form coalitions in pursuit of collective action. And again, collective action refers to the process of a group organizing and acting in pursuit of a shared goal. The NAACP's use of litigation to undermine the legality of segregation policies in southern states is an example. So the effectiveness of a given social movement is often reflected in their capacity for, organizing to build that movement and their ability to, again, build coalitions. If you note, the story from Desmond Meade, part of what made his efforts successful was that he was smart in framing his social movement in nonpartisan terms. He believed in returning the franchise to felons who had served their sentences, and he believed that premise really didn't favor one party over the other. And he worked with conservatives who, had previously also lost their right to vote, like Neil Volz, who had been a GOP lobbyist, convicted in scandals related to Republican lobbyist Jack Abramoff's criminal activities in the early 2000s. So even when social movements succeed in getting people mobilized, there's no guarantee that a social movement will succeed. Oftentimes, there are counter mobilizations that may prove to be even more powerful. Strategies used by social movements: they may employ insider or outsider tactics to achieve their goals. Well-established interest groups who possess large institutional resources, either high name recognition, good reputations, access to finances, lobbyists, large memberships, and things like that, can, it's more natural for them to employ insider strategies. Groups that lack those kinds of institutional resources are oftentimes forced to rely on outsider strategies like peaceful marches, nonviolent tactics like sit-ins, things like that, boycotts. Again, that oftentimes these folks are working to shift public opinion. And they can do that, again, variety of ways. They can, again, try to publicize the injustice of their cause. They can attempt to gain the attention of the president. They can work to try and get members of Congress involved. They can work writing briefs, for the federal courts and whatnot. These are all kind of strategies that can be employed. The civil rights movement, which really begins in the 17th century and persisted through the 1960s. Slavery and the abolitionist movement. Slavery, again, was integral to European colonial settlement in North America. The first enslaved people arrived in Jamestown, Virginia in 1619. A year before the Plymouth colony was established in Massachusetts. While indentured servitude was legal in northern colonies, it quickly died out because a more kind of capitalist-oriented outlook took hold. In the southern states, however, the slave-based planter economy took hold, and the invention of the cotton gin quickly increased southern planter elites' commitment to a slave-based economy. Enslaved communities frequently resisted in a variety of ways. The principal tactics included periodic slave revolts, but mainly consisted of attempted escapes and the establishment of the Underground Railroad to northern states and freedom. In reaction, Southern planter elites militarized and even had, in colonial times, established slave patrols to round up escaped slaves. Over time, slaves adopted more subtle tactics like slowdowns, furtive forms of sabotage, as a reprisal for, particularly oppressive treatment by slave owners. The Supreme Court's decision in Dred Scott v. Sanford in 1857 really set the country on the pathway to civil war. And again, the things that happened prior to that, the Fugitive Slave Act, which was an attempt by the South to use the power of the federal government to compel northern states to return escaped slaves, was another thing that really kind of was a violation of federalism first and foremost, and set people again at odds with one another, Northerners versus Southerners, in a way that sort of, rendered much more likely the fact that we would eventually fight a civil war. So that's it for this presentation. When we come back, we will continue our discussion of civil rights.